Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the webinar, and a couple of quick things. First of all, this is the Microsoft Excel webinar around using the VLOOKUP function. My name is Neil Malek, and I'll be presenting a few different ways of using the VLOOKUP function, why it's useful, why it can tend to be frustrating every once in a while, and what we can do to customize it to a certain extent. Now, before we get off the ground here, I just want to make sure that everybody has my email address at their disposal. If you don't hear from me after the session for whatever reason, or if you want to follow up with me about something that I'm talking about, please feel free to use my email address, neil@knacktraining.com. And after this session is over, I will be posting this as a video to youtube.com/neilmalik. Now, right now, you can actually go on my YouTube channel and see the webinars about how to use slide masters to effectively control PowerPoint presentations and how to use pivot tables within Excel 2010 and 2013. In next month's session, I'm going to be talking about how to use Visio, how to connect Visio shapes, and how to work with organization charts and other types of diagrams that Visio is capable of creating. Now, if you want to go ahead and use the same file that I'm using in today's session after the session is over, and you want to sort of work through it on your own, the address where you can download that is bit.ly/VLOOKUP file. Now, if you've never used one of these bit.ly web addresses that I'm showing you on the screen right now, the capitalization is actually essential in these bit.ly addresses. So bit.ly/ capital V, capital L, capital O, capital O, capital K, capital U, capital P, capital F, lowercase ILE will allow you to download the VLOOKUP Excel spreadsheet from today's session. But essentially, everything that I'm going to be doing can be done in sample data that you have on hand for your office as well. So feel free to use mine or try to translate what I'm doing into your own files. And I'm sure that there are going to be sets of data that you use in your work that will basically mirror what we're going to be doing in today's session. Now, you do have two ways of communicating with me here today. You guys are all muted right now. You can always unmute your lines and speak to me through the computer. Or if you look at the left-hand side of the screen, the chat bar, you can go ahead and use that chat bar to ask me questions, to ask me to back up and repeat steps, etc. So our rundown today is what is the VLOOKUP function, what is it useful for, how does it work, couple of different standard uses for it, meaning that we can use it to look up a single record or use it to actually mash up two tables together. And I'll also show you a little bit more of a non-standard use for it. The non-standard use will come in when we start talking about the ways in which we can customize the VLOOKUP function and some of the ways in which we address how the VLOOKUP function works. And the last bit that I'll do here is VLOOKUP is a very powerful function, something that you probably will have heard of in the past and will hear of in the future and need to use in many different situations. However, VLOOKUP is one of those functions that has many, many different gotchas, for lack of a better term. It has lots of these little things that it doesn't work the right way in certain situations, or it doesn't have a tool for handling certain situations, things like that. And when that happens, the VLOOKUP function is actually ripe for using in nested functions. If you've never seen me do a nested function before, basically the gist of this is that we can use two functions together to accomplish something that one function by itself is not capable of doing. So we'll address one of those situations in today's session, and you'll see that there are lots of other different types of nested functions that work well with VLOOKUP. So let's go ahead and get started with what is VLOOKUP, how does it work, and why do I care about this thing? So we start off with the term VLOOKUP. If you're going to create a VLOOKUP function, or really any function that's out there, functions always begin with the equal sign. Then there's the name of the function, whatever that name happens to be, and then something goes into parentheses afterwards. Now, a lot of people hear this VLOOKUP function, but obviously VLOOKUP isn't really English in and of itself, so we need to understand what exactly VLOOKUP is and why we would be trying to do something like this. So what you'll need to do is simply break this into two parts. The first part is the V. As you can see, I've bolded the V here at the beginning. V means vertical. And then lookup, you've pretty much got down. It's something that looks for something. So in total, VLOOKUP means that you go down a list, you look for something, and you move down the list until you find whatever it is you're looking for. So V, as in vertical, move down the list and look for something. And when you find it, then you're able to move forward. So there are a lot of scenarios in which this needs to happen, where you have a large set of data and you tell Excel, hey, I need you to look down through this data and find the thing I'm looking for specifically. So let's see how this would work in total. VLOOKUP has 4 different positions. The 4th position inside the parentheses is not required, so I'm not going to address it just yet. That'll be very, very shortly here. But the first 3 sections inside your VLOOKUP function are the 3 components that help it do its job. So let's see what exactly VLOOKUP does. The first part of the VLOOKUP function, this first position inside the VLOOKUP function, is for whatever it is you're looking for. So for example, you might put in something like a sale ID if you're looking at a table full of sales transactions, or you might put in an employee ID if you're looking at a table full of employees, or you might put in the value of a particular product if you're looking at a table full of products. What you're doing here in the first position in the VLOOKUP function is saying, this is what I need you to find for me. And we'll address this a little bit more specifically here in a second. But the first position is, I need you to find this for me. The second position is, where do you need me to find it in? So you go to the second position and you say, here's the big list. Here's the spreadsheet full of stuff that I need you to look through. So again, going backwards here, this is the product ID, the sale ID, the employee ID that I need you to find me. And this is where I need you to look for it. So that's the first 2 pieces of VLOOKUP. It's going to go into a large set of data and go down the list until it finds the ID that we're looking for. Now the third thing, excuse me, seems kind of silly, but it's necessary. The third thing is for, okay, when you find it, what do you want me to give you back? So for example here, if you were looking for an employee ID number, when you found the right employee ID number, then you might need to turn around and say, okay, now that you've found the right employee ID number, let's see what that employee's first name is. Let's see what their last name is. Let's see what their date of hire is, things like that. And in VLOOKUP, the way that we accomplish this is by giving the VLOOKUP function the column index number of the thing you want to retrieve. So let's see this in an actual example here. If I were looking at a table like this, I might need to find a specific property. So as you can see here, first column is the ID number of the property. The second column is the date that we started up on this property. The third column is what type of property is it. And the fourth column is what subtype of property is it. Now, if I told you that I knew that you were looking in that first column for, let's say, CRUA 4163, for example, you guys can look in that table. First thing you need to see is we're looking vertically down this table, right? We're going from the top of the table to the bottom of the table, so that's the V in VLOOKUP. Vertically down the table, we're going to move down until we find CRUA-4163. Okay, so we're looking for one specific thing, and where do you want me to look for it? As you can see, the second part of every VLOOKUP function says, here's the big table that I need you to go look in. And so here I'm saying find me CRUA-4163 in the table that starts at A3 and goes all the way over to D10. So let's imagine that we're the VLOOKUP function right now. I tell you, go to that table and find me CRUA-4163. You go, okay, I'm going to start over here on the left-hand side, and I'm going to move down and down and down, and sooner or later you arrive at CRUA-4163. So congratulations, you found the thing we're looking for. But now what do we do with that? What do we do now that we've found CRUA-4163? We need to now tell the VLOOKUP function, hey, from here, I want you to tell me what type of property is it. Is it a residential property or is it a commercial property? So if you want me to go from the property ID number column over there on the left over to the commercial area over in the property type column, as you can see at the bottom, what I'm doing here is I'm typing in the column index number as 3. And it legitimately is this easy, everybody. Start from the left. The property ID column is column number 1. The date initiated column is column number 2. And the property type column is column number 3. So just like that, we've told it start off by going over to the left-hand column and looking for CRUA-4163. You need to look for it in that big table over there. And when you find CRUA-4163, I need you to go over to the third column and tell me whether it's a commercial or a residential property. And so that's the fundamental way that VLOOKUP works. It is a function that allows you to go into a big list of information like this one, move down that list vertically, find a specific ID number that we have in mind, and when you find it, go across and find a piece of information that's related to it. So how's everybody feeling about this? The description, how is everybody feeling about how this works and why you would need to do something like this? Anybody have any questions for me? Okay. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift over to the spreadsheet and do this live instead of on the slides. So again, here is a big list of information. I call these things right here lists or tables, kind of interchangeably. But what we're looking at is a big set of information. Now the VLOOKUP function will start over here on the patient ID column, and it'll move vertically down the left-hand side, looking for something. When it finds that something for me, we're then going to take the column index number and retrieve either the insurance company or the date or the referring physician or the attending physician or some piece of information. And the way that we tell it what to retrieve is again by the column index number. So let's go to cell B2 right here. As you can see, I've already got it set up properly so that I know what patient ID number I'm looking for, and then I'm looking for the referring physician. So again, thinking ahead here, we're going to look for YNJ8802 over here in this column someplace. It's going to look down this list for that ID number, and when it finds it, I then need to tell it to look for the referring physician number. So the column index number here would be 1, 2, 3, 4. If I need you to retrieve for me the referring physician, I'm going to tell you column index number 4. Let's see this in action. In cell B2, on my Formulas tab up at the top of the screen, I'm going to go look for the lookup and reference family of formulas. And as you can see, under lookup and reference, down at the bottom, we have the VLOOKUP function. So again, lookup and reference, down to VLOOKUP. And as you can see, as I was describing on the slide, there are 3 elements inside the VLOOKUP function, 4 elements inside the VLOOKUP function. and 3 of them are bolded and 1 is not bolded. That means that these 3 elements right here are required because they are bolded, and the one that is not bolded is not required to be able to do the job. So let's start at the top. What is the lookup value I want to retrieve? That is that YNJ8802 that we were talking about earlier. Where is the table of information that we're going to go looking for YNJ882 in? Well, it starts here and it goes down and across. That is the table array. And then the column index number I just counted up, it's column number 4. So let's try that out. The lookup value is cell A2, YNJ8802. The table array, where I'm going to look for YNJ8802, starts at cell A4 with the patient ID, goes all the way over here, and all the way down there. Okay, so I didn't know this ahead of time, but it's A4 through K1547. So there's a lot of records in there. So if you tell me to look for YNJ8802, I probably find it somewhere in this first column. And when I do, the last piece of information that I'm curious about is what exactly should I retrieve for you? And I'm telling you referring physician. And again, it's just this easy. For the column index number, you legitimately just count 1, 2, 3, 4. The referring physician is in column number 4. Now, up until this point, I've been telling you that only 3 of these elements are required, and that is true. However, I would say that in most scenarios, we do actually want to go to cell number 4 here, the range lookup, and fill it in. And I'd like you to see for yourself why that is. So if I click in the range lookup box here, you're going to see that the range lookup is described right here for you in plain English. And what does it tell me? Range lookup says that if you leave this open, if you omit it or you set it equal to true, what will happen? If you omit it, it's going to find the closest match. Well, that's not what I want. I don't want to find a close match for YNJ8802. I want to find an exact match for YNJ8802. So in order to find an exact match, as you can see right here at the end, this is why I said most of the time I find myself filling it in. That's because I almost always want to find an exact match. So I almost always type false into the range lookup box. So I'm going to go to my range lookup box, and in order to find an exact match instead of a close match, I type the word false into my range lookup box, and I'm done. I click OK, and as you can see, the patient ID number the patient ID YNJ8802 had the referring physician of Dr. Meza. Does anybody have any questions about that? Did that seem like it made sense the first time through? I'm about to do a second run of it, but does anybody have any questions for me? Let's see this in action one more time. So if I wanted to find the attending physician, there we go. In order to find the attending physician, one more time, I'm going to look for the patient ID number, YNJ8802. It's going to be over here in this column someplace, inside the much larger table. Then, once you find it, I need to tell you to go across to the attending physician column, and the attending physician column is the 5th column of the table. So one more time, that's going into cell C2, clicking on Lookup and Reference, and choosing VLOOKUP. I'm then able to use the lookup value of cell A2, which is YNJ8802. I'm able to tell it the table I want to go look in, starts at cell A4 and it goes all the way over and all the way down, and that's all the way to K1547. Okay, so look for YNJ8802 in that big table, and then when you find it, I want you to go across the attending physician column, and again, that's column number 5. Now, the thing that might cause you to get a mistake here is if you allow it to find a close match instead of an exact match. And that's where we went to the range lookup box earlier and typed false in so that it would necessarily require it to look for an exact match for YNJ8802 instead of a close enough match. I hit OK, and there's Dr. Harrington. And here's why you type in false. If I randomly type in the patient ID as Sanders, for example, you should know, based off that column over there on the left for patient ID, that there isn't any patient ID labeled Sanders, right? We've come up with these random letters and numbers. It's definitely not Sanders. So if you're not finding me Sanders, then what should necessarily happen is the referring physician and attending physician should both basically not work, right? So there it is. If I type in Sanders, both the referring physician and the attending physician tell you there is no referring physician for Sanders because we couldn't find anybody named Sanders over here. But if instead I took that CWJ2733 that's sitting right there, and I put that in, well, CWJ2733, the referring physician is Silva, and the attending physician is Ceballos. If I take BKR3238, the referring physician is Littles, and the attending physician is Arold. But again, if I type in something random like GMN-9898, well, if there is no GMN 9898, it should not be able to find that person. So that's why the last element in the VLOOKUP function should typically be set to false. How's everybody feeling? Anybody have any questions, curiosities, concerns, trials or tribulations, anything at all? Lovely. So this is a very simple way of using VLOOKUP in that you have a large set of data and you want to retrieve one record. Now, what a lot of people do with VLOOKUP is something just a little bit more complicated than this. As you can see, I've got another tab over here called All Properties, and this is every single property that we've ever initiated on. And now, immediately to the right of that, you see that I have a tab down here that lists every property that was sold in the last 21 days. So here, what I'm about to do is I'm about to take the All Properties tab, and in the sold in the last 21 days, you can see that I have some of my property ID numbers, but not all of them. And then I have these sale prices. So what I might want to do is take these ID numbers, and then over here, let's say, you see here I've got the date closed, I've got the buyer, and I've got the sale price. Well, what if I wanted to have a column here for who's the salesperson, a column over here for what region is it in, a column over here for what type of property is it? Well, as you can see here, this table exactly matches over to this much larger table. So this is something that people do with VLOOKUP very regularly. They take two tables and they mash them together using the VLOOKUP function. So before I do that, there was a question that just came in through the chat box. What if you had two identical patient ID numbers and a different referring physician for every row? That's a wonderful question, Michelle. So basically what happens here is that VLOOKUP is only capable of returning to you one value. So in our scenario right here, if you have the same patient ID number over and over and over again, it's only able to find you that first person. So if you wanted to do something like mash together a few of them or create a list of all of them, something along those lines, you'd need a different technique for doing that. VLOOKUP, this is actually a very important thing. I'm going to go ahead and type this out so that you guys can see it as I say it out loud. VLOOKUP is really built on the idea of having unique entries, of having unique ID numbers, things along those lines. Now, there are other scenarios, definitely, but for the most part, when you use VLOOKUP, what you're trying to do is you're trying to retrieve the match for one of your elements. Now, if what you needed to do was create, let's say, a table that had every single record for patient CDZ5425, for example, then you'd probably want to filter this table. If what you wanted to do was take all of patient CDZ5425's records and maybe add up all the charges, you'd want to use a different function like SUMIF, for example. VLOOKUP is mostly focused on the idea of being able to retrieve a single record based off of unique entries. That's a very important idea, and it's something that you should definitely investigate more, and something we'll definitely talk about more as we move forward with this. Okay, anything else? Okay. So here, if I go to my sold in the last 21 days table, if I want to define something like who is the lead agent who sold this property, here's what I might do. I might say, do my VLOOKUP function using the property ID over here, and use that to look in the property ID, all properties table over here, and then retrieve who the lead agent is. So as you can see, the lead agent is in column number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So let's try that out. I'd go to my lead agent column, column E right there. I'd type in, well, actually, let's do the lookup and reference drop-down menu and choose VLOOKUP right there. My lookup value is property ID RLPR6230. My table array is this big table over here, all of these records. And then once I go into that table to retrieve something, I then need to be able to retrieve who the lead agent is. So the lead agent is again in column index number 6. And as per what we've done in the past, we're going to type in the word false in the range lookup box. As you can see here, it finds Rich as the agent for this property. And then if I autofill that down, you can see it also retrieves all the other lead agents for me. And again, I'll repeat this. I might go over here and find the region where this property was sold. To do this, I'd go to Lookup and Reference drop-down menu, go to VLOOKUP. I'd look up the value RLPR6230. I'd look for it in that big table over here. And then I'd retrieve what region that was in. Let's see, region is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's in the 5th column. And again, range lookup is false because I want to find the exact match, not a close match. And so as you can see, another way of using the VLOOKUP function is to mash up two tables at the same time. How's everybody doing on that? Anybody have any questions? Excellent. Okay, now here is the use case for true. So up until now, everybody, I've been saying false, 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 false every time that we ask whether we want to find a close match or not. Here's an example where you'd want to leave it open. As you can see, I can look for $495,000 in this table right here and use it to retrieve whether this is a standard customer, a silver customer, a gold customer, or a platinum customer. Because nobody is going to hit exactly $500,000, I don't want to find an exact match for $500,000. I want to find the close match to that. So by going to Lookup and Reference and choosing VLOOKUP, I can look for the value of the year-to-date purchases in the table over here on the right. And I can look for the second column to find me whether it's a standard, a silver, a gold, or a platinum customer. Now this is where it gets a little bit interesting. In the range lookup box right here, as you can see, it says that it's going to find the closest match in the first column sorted in ascending order. What that means is that it's going to use the Bob Barker method to find its match. It's going to find the closest match without going over. So you've got to set up your table in a very specific way. Here, if I've said that Aption Electronics has purchased $495,000 worth of products from us, over here, $495,000 needs to be close but not have gone over. So we need to make sure we set it up so that gold status, for example, in order to hit gold status, you need to exceed $500,000. In order to hit silver status, you need to exceed $250,000. And in order to hit standard status, you need to exceed $0. So in finding the closest match without going over, this is very important. $495,000 is obviously very close to $500,000, but this still says that these people are silver customers because they have not gone over, right? It's the closest match without going over, so this is over, so that means they are silver customers. We hit OK? And we see here it can look at things up in this range by finding the closest match without going over. Okay, so that's a reason why you would leave it omitted. Again, most of the time I find myself looking up exact matches for things like ID numbers in both of the previous scenarios. But if you find yourself in a situation where you have ranges, then you can leave that last box in the VLOOKUP function omitted to find a close match without going over. Other questions? Lovely. And finally, so I don't know if you guys noticed this or not, but when you open up your spreadsheet, you're going to have this little marker here on the last page. It's going to describe what I'm about to say out loud here. As you can see, right now I'm looking for the patient ID YNJ8802, and it's finding me that the referring physician is Mesa, and that the phone number for Mesa is 323-700-2699. Now, what would happen if I took the patient ID number out altogether? Well, because the VLOOKUP function was trying to find something and it couldn't find it, as you can see, the referring physician box has this NA, meaning it's not able to find a matching physician, right? Or if I were to type in Sanders like I did before, again, this is NA because there is no referring physician for the patient ID Sanders. And when I type in like OYV4395, for example, then it finds that that's Dr. Mesa. So I now look over here to the right at the phone number, and the phone number is definitely doing the same thing that the referring physician is doing, right? It's finding the referring physician here, it's finding the phone number here. But for some reason, when I did something like type in Sanders into the patient ID number, as opposed to cell B2 where it had NA, in cell D2, it's nothing. And the reason for this is because we are nesting functions together. So I said earlier that VLOOKUP has a bunch of things that I don't like about it or that will cause you issues in the future. And one of them happens to be that if you look for something that doesn't exist, the VLOOKUP function gives you this NA error message. So a lot of times, if I'm working with my boss, I may want to make sure that there are none of these error messages, none of these NA error messages. And so for that reason, you can see right here that what I've done with the second VLOOKUP function, so you look at the VLOOKUP function here on the left, look for cell A2 and find me the exact match is what the referring physician does. But over here on the right, do you see what this does? The VLOOKUP function is nested inside a function called ifError. When you're in Microsoft Excel, I would highly recommend finding out what the ifError function does and how it works for a wide range of different scenarios. What the ifError does is it allows you to do this lookup just the way it is. But if VLOOKUP is going to give you an error message, right, if error, then what is it going to do instead? And you see right here at the end, it's going to do nothing. See, those double quotation marks right there mean if there is an error message, go ahead and output nothing at all. Let's see that in action. So here, if I type in VSW 8673, the referring physician finds me Chapman. Let's find the attending physician. And the phone number it finds as well. But instead of inserting the VLOOKUP function already, what I'm going to do instead is go to my logical drop-down menu and find the function called ifError. So in the Formulas tab, at this point, instead of going directly to VLOOKUP, I'm going to the logical drop-down menu and choosing ifError. Now what's about to happen is, within the ifError function there are two spaces. One of them allows you to insert a function. Bless me, sorry about that. And the other allows you to insert a custom error message. So let's try that out. I hit the logical drop-down menu. I pick ifError. And in the value box, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in VLOOKUP for cell A2 in the large table, and find me column index number. Let's see, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and find me the exact match. Now you guys have seen the VLOOKUP function 3 times now. And so here is the VLOOKUP function in all its glory. Look for cell A2 in all those cells, A4 through K1547. Get me back the 5th column, and false, find me an exact match, not a close enough match. It does the exact same thing, but if there's an error message, let's go ahead and put in double quotation marks, no such patient. Just like that. And so by nesting the VLOOKUP function into the ifError function, we're allowing ourselves to do a very nice little error message in those scenarios where it's not able to find a match. I hit OK. And now, as you can see, looking for patient VSW 8673 finds me Dr. Chapman as the referring physician, Dr. Hansen as the attending physician, the phone number is 626, yada, yada, yada. If the patient ID were Sanders, like we did earlier, you see here that the referring physician, just the VLOOKUP function by itself gives me an error message of NA. But by nesting it inside the ifError function, I'm able to come up with a much nicer error message of no such patient. Again, BKR 3238. Both of them do the job of finding me the referring and attending physicians. Typing in NMN 9090 tells me no such patient in the ifError function. Again, the downloadable spreadsheet that you can find online allows you to see how the ifError function works properly over here. So that's very nice. Okay, there's a little question here. For the scenario, where's the phone number found? Oh, sorry about that, Christine. You just have to scroll far enough to the right. phone number. Oh, actually, no. Oh, I looked it up in a different table way over here, didn't I? Yeah, sorry about that. I actually made myself a tiny little table over here to the right so that I could look for that person's phone number. All right. Any other questions, curiosities, issues, or anything else I can clear up for you guys before you guys go back to work? Fine. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your day and be incredible at what you do. Thanks, everybody.